And the WNBA and the NBA, the owners, they're like daddy driving in the front seat, right? And you're driving down the road and, you got a smart mouth. The players got a smart mouth right now. And they think they're being cute. And then dad, of course.
That analogy right there might sound ridiculous, but it's actually the perfect way to understand what's happening right now between WNBA players and ownership. Because the Players Union just dropped another counterproposal on Friday night, and the numbers reveal something critical. They're not negotiating anymore. They're testing boundaries, and the owners, they haven't budged an inch in weeks. Here's what nobody's saying out loud. We might be heading toward a lockout. Not a strike, a lockout. And there's a massive difference.
The players have put another proposal out there, and I got to be honest with you. I'm like, if I'm Adam Silver, I just call the owners and like, if we even begin to think these imbeciles are going to strike, lock them out. Lock them out. Beat them to the punch. Lock them out. And I bring this up because we're going to get to the new proposal in a second. But let me start here. I tried to get to this article earlier. Luckily, somebody did and put a cutout. The paywall for sports.
Adam Silver could absolutely do this. And based on the pattern we're seeing, it might be the smartest play ownership has. Because here's what just happened on Friday evening, February 14th. The WNBA Players Association submitted their latest counterproposal. Alexa Philippou from ESPN broke the story late Friday night, which is becoming a pattern. Every major proposal from the players drops on Friday evenings when social media engagement is lowest and the news cycle is slowest. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. They're trying to minimize public backlash. But let's look at what they're actually proposing, because the numbers tell the real story.
Dent in the salary cap, yada, 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 but they sure as fuck didn't go forwards or even serve. And the players are dropping their proposals, but they're not doing it substantially at all. Alexa Philippou broke this late last night. The Women's National Basketball Players Association submitted a new counterproposal to the WNBA on Friday evenings. Once again, another Friday evening counterproposal. I contend that they always do this because they don't want to get
26% of gross revenue. That's the new number from the Players Union, down from their previous ask of 27.5%. And the league is calling this a concession worth nearly $100 million over the life of the deal. Sounds significant, right? Except the owners are offering less than 15% of gross revenue. That's the equivalent of 70% of net revenue after expenses. So even with this so-called concession, the players are still asking for almost double what ownership is offering. The gap hasn't closed, it's barely moved. And here's the detail that should terrify players. The ownership offer hasn't changed in over a month, not by a single percentage point. While the players keep dropping their proposals, ownership is holding firm at that sub 15% number. That's not negotiation, that's a line in the sand.
You run out of free articles, it's like, what? How much a year? You got to be kidding me. I'm not paying that. But this was a snippet from this about the players' division inside the players' union. The sense, according to sources, is that there is still not enough player dissent to revive or fast-track a new strike authorization vote.
This is the critical piece of context everyone needs to understand. According to Sports Business Journal, back in December, the Players Union sent out a strike authorization survey to every player in the league. They asked if players would authorize the executive committee to call a strike if deemed necessary. 93% of players responded, and of those who responded, 98% voted yes. 98%. That's essentially unanimous support for strike authorization. But here's what changed. Sources now say that number would not be at 98% if they voted today. There's still a clear majority in favor, but there's now definable opposition within the union. The question is, how much opposition? Is it 30%? 40%? Because if a third of your union doesn't support a strike, you've got a massive problem.
They did pay us after they said they would if they ever made enough money. A change that a source said amounts to nearly $100 million in reductions on revenue share. Yeah, but the WNBA has told you we'll lose $700 million I mean, come on. The new proposal also contains tweaks to the union's housing offerings. Are we back on this housing thing again? You can't pay for your own apartment? Previously, the players asked the teams to continue to provide housing to players in the first several years of the new deal.
Housing. We're still talking about housing, and this might be the most damaging part of the entire negotiation for public perception. The new proposal from the Players' Union includes what they're calling tweaks to housing provisions. Previously, they asked teams to provide housing for all players in the early years of the new CBA, but in later years, teams wouldn't be obligated to provide it for players making at least 80% of maximum salary on multi-year deals with full salary protection. The new proposal lowers that threshold to 75% of max salary and removes the multi-year requirement. Think about what this means in practical terms. Under the owner's latest proposal, the minimum salary would be over $200,000. The rookie scale would pay first-round picks even more, and these players are still asking for team-provided housing. This is not a good look at all, because to the average fan watching at home, this sounds like professional athletes making six figures asking their employers to pay their rent. It sounds like welfare. And whether that's fair or not, perception matters in negotiations that depend on public support.
I would not agree to pay for their housing. That's ludicrous to me. It's ridiculous. Both sides are still far apart on the issue of revenue sharing, including proposing different revenue sharing systems. The WNBA has held firm in its proposal, with players being offered on average 70% of net revenue after expenses, which would amount to less than 15% of gross. So that's why when people are talking about this,
70% of net revenue after expenses works out to less than 15% of gross revenue. That's the ownership position, and it hasn't moved. Meanwhile, the players have gone from 27.5% of gross down to 26%. That's movement, but it's not substantial movement. Not when you're still asking for almost double what the other side is offering. And here's the math problem the players are facing. The WNBA just posted its first profitable year. They paid out revenue-sharing bonuses to players for the first time ever. And according to multiple reports, that payment changed attitudes within the union. Players who were skeptical about the league's financial projections suddenly saw real money hit their accounts. That's why you're seeing this split emerge. But profitability doesn't mean unlimited resources. The league has stated publicly they expect to lose $700 million over the life of the next CBA, even with conservative revenue sharing. The players' proposal would push that loss even higher. At some point, the math just doesn't work.
Got that cleared up. The 2026 salary cap would come in at $5.65 million, up to $1.5 million in 2025. Or it's got to be 2026, right? In subsequent years, it would grow in line with the revenue growth. And we all know what that looks like. I am not going through that. Yeah, it's a clown show. It's still a clown show. 26% of gross revenue. You're not close. You're not close. I don't know where they meet. I really don't. Because the owners, in case you have not noticed, they have not budged on that revenue sharing number in weeks and weeks now. I'm just pointing that out. The players are...
This is where it gets really interesting, because we're not just talking about money anymore. We're talking about control, we're talking about leverage, and we're talking about who blinks first. The players thought they had leverage. Record ratings in 2024. Caitlin Clark's rookie season bringing unprecedented attention, sold-out arenas, new media deals. Angel Reese in the Chicago Sky drawing massive crowds. Everything pointed toward a breakout moment for the league. But ownership knows something the players are just starting to realize. Momentum is fragile. You can't strike your way into a bigger piece of a pie that might disappear if you stop playing. The casual fans who showed up for Caitlin Clark in 2024, they're not diehard WNBA fans yet. They're Caitlin Clark fans. And if there's no season in 2025, they'll watch college basketball instead. That's the leverage ownership has, and they know it. Remember what Adam Silver said back in October on the Today Show when he was promoting the return of NBA on NBC? The interviewer asked about WNBA revenue sharing, and Silver immediately corrected him. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I wouldn't call it revenue sharing. He was very deliberate about that language, very specific, and the players got upset about it at the time. But he was sending a message. He was telling them, don't assume this is the NBA model. Don't assume you're getting 50% of revenue like NBA players get. This is a different league with different economics, and the rules are different. That was 4 months ago, and the ownership position hasn't moved since then. If anything, it's hardened. Now look at the timing of these proposals. The players keep dropping counteroffers late on Friday nights. That's not when you release something you're proud of. That's when you're trying to bury bad news. They know these proposals aren't going to be popular. They know the public isn't on their side when they're asking for housing stipends while making six-figure salaries. So they release the information when the fewest people are paying attention. But here's what they're not accounting for. The owners don't care about the Friday news cycle. They care about the bottom line. And the bottom line is this. They're willing to lose a season before they agree to a deal that guarantees hundreds of millions in losses. That's why a lockout is more likely than a strike. If the players vote to strike, they look like the bad guys walking away from a historic opportunity. But if ownership locks them out, suddenly the narrative shifts. The players become the victims. Public sympathy swings their direction. And ownership can say, we made a fair offer. They rejected it, and we can't operate a league under the terms they're demanding. It's brutal. It's calculated. And it might be exactly what happens. Think about the players who are breaking ranks right now. The ones who don't support strike authorization anymore. What changed for them? They got paid. They saw the revenue-sharing check. They played in front of sold-out crowds. They experienced what success feels like in this league. And now they're being asked to walk away from that for a bigger percentage of revenue that might not exist if they strike. That's not an easy sell, especially for veterans who only have a few years left in their careers. Especially for rookies who just got drafted and haven't made any real money yet. Especially for players on teams that weren't playoff contenders, who are just happy to have stable employment in professional basketball. The union is fracturing, and ownership knows it. So what happens next? The season is supposed to start in May. We're in mid-February. That gives them roughly 10 weeks to figure this out. And based on the current trajectory, they're not getting there. The players are moving in slow motion, dropping their demands by 1 or 2 percentage points at a time. Ownership isn't moving at all. At some point, someone has to make a dramatic move. Either the players have to drop their revenue-sharing demands significantly, down into the high teens or low 20% range, or ownership has to come up substantially from 15%. Neither side shows any indication of doing that, which means we're headed for a work stoppage. The only question is, who pulls the trigger first? My money's on ownership. Lock them out. Beat them to the punch. Control the narrative. Force the players to come back to the table with a realistic proposal instead of these incremental adjustments that don't actually close the gap. Because here's the thing, nobody wants to say out loud, the players don't have as much leverage as they think they do. The league survived for decades without Caitlin Clark. It'll survive without one season if it has to. But the players, most of them don't have overseas options that pay better than the WNBA. Most of them don't have endorsement deals that can sustain them through a lost season. Most of them need this league more than this league needs any individual player. That's harsh, but it's reality. And the longer these negotiations drag on, the more obvious that reality becomes. The players who voted 98% in favor of strike authorization back in December, they were riding high on the success of the 2024 season. They thought they had all the momentum. They thought ownership would cave. 4 months later, ownership hasn't budged. The players have dropped their demands twice, and suddenly that strike authorization doesn't look so unanimous anymore. So when you see the next counterproposal drop on a Friday night, pay attention to the pattern. Pay attention to what's not changing, because the real story isn't what the players are asking for. The real story is what ownership refuses to give. And right now, they're refusing to give anything beyond that sub 15% of gross revenue number. The question is, will the players accept reality before they lose a season? Or will they push this all the way to a lockout, lose the PR battle, and end up taking a worse deal than what's on the table right now? Because that's the risk they're running. Hold out for 26%, get locked out, watch public opinion turn against you, and end up settling for 17% after missing half a season. That's the nightmare scenario for the union. And based on how ownership is playing this, that might be exactly what they're counting on.